Hey guys, another video for our crime and emergency services in Japan playlist. What we've seen demonstrated in Japan over the last couple of weeks is something that we've actually talked about previously, and that's the way Japanese people respond to a crisis or an emergency. And it's in a very calm, orderly way, and it makes all the difference to the sort of experience that we have of things that happen. So what we've seen the last couple of weeks is, except for a little bit of panic about the masks, because as we've explained or demonstrated or shown lots of times previously, there's a lot of Japanese people who wear masks pretty much every day of the year for various reasons. Some it's just allergies or hay fever or fear of germs or fear of being seen in public by other people or all sorts of reasons. But as most of you guys already know, masks are a fairly central part of Japanese life for a lot of Japanese people, so the idea of not having masks was a scary one. So we did see some panic about the masks, and the masks all disappeared pretty quickly, and there is still a shortage of masks. However, if we queue up at the drugstores in the morning and wait, when we go in we can buy masks. So there was a little bit of panic about the mask situation, but other than that, pretty well nothing. Everyone's been very calm and reasonable. We had just leaving Central Japan International Airport. Wait a minute, didn't like that 100. Here we go. There we go. Thank you. So there was a little bit of panic about the masks, but that's settled down again now. And there was a little bit of a panic about toilet paper, because that same rumour went around Japan, that went around a lot of other countries. And there was a little bit of a shortage of toilet paper for a short period of time, and that's over. And we actually noticed recently, we went to the supermarket and there was a mountain. They must have super stocked up because they'd been selling so many. So there was a mountain of toilet paper in the middle of the supermarket and nobody even looking at it. Because what was obviously happening is people had bought up, but also they were seeing that there was so much there, and they're going, oh, there's lots of toilet paper, there's no need to buy any. So it was just a big mountain of it in the middle of the supermarket, you know. But even then, those of you who watch all our videos would have seen the video that we showed about the toilet paper, and people were waiting outside the supermarket in the morning to go in. And then when the doors opened, they filed in an orderly manner and went over to where the toilet paper was and quietly picked up a packet and slowly walked over to the cash register, and it was already very, very ordered and very, very calm and polite and considerate of others. And actually, while we're on that too, just expanding on that, at the time that there was a bit of a toilet paper shortage, when we first did come across one of these mountains, the Japanese person I was with, I said, how about we get two? And the person I was with said, no, we'll only get one and that'll leave one for someone else. And that's the Japanese thing, and we see that all the time. We see that all the time here, and that there are sort of policies. Some of the supermarkets brought in policies where you can only buy one packet of toilet paper per person. So if there was two of you shopping together, you could buy two. So they did bring in policies, but also it's the Japanese way of thinking, is that I'll only take what I need and that'll leave something for the other people. And we see that all the time. We've given you examples of that before. You know, you go sit down in a park somewhere or sit down in a restaurant and people will move over so you've got more room to sit down. You know, you see a lot of that sort of thing here, the consideration for the other people, and that seems to be the central key. So when everything goes bad, and there's a disaster, people behave in a really civilized manner. So there's been no fighting. I mean, this week, because, you know, we watch the same stuff on the internet that you guys watch, so we've seen some people in the USA queuing up to buy guns. We've seen people in Australia cleaning out supermarkets. There are supermarkets in Australia that are totally empty because people have bought absolutely everything in the supermarket and end up with an empty supermarket. And also we saw a video of two guys fighting over something in a supermarket. They both wanted to buy the same thing or something, and they end up fighting over it. So we've seen all those scenes this week of bad behaviour from panicking people around the world. None of that. We've seen none of that in Japan. None of it. You know, no doubt there are people panicking, no doubt there are people being selfish and behaving badly, no doubt, but it's such a minority that we don't even see it. And that seems to be the difference, you know, that it seems to be, from what we're seeing, is that a lot of the dramas are actually coming as a result of the behaviour of the people rather than actually of the virus itself, you know. And whereas in Japan, people are behaving in such a civilised way that that's not creating any more dramas than what's necessary, you know. As far as the government reaction to these things, you know, sometimes they have good reactions to things, sometimes they don't, sometimes they underreact, sometimes they overreact. In this case, yeah, their reaction's probably been pretty reasonable. They shut all the schools down, and then following that, all the clubs and organisations and city buildings and things all shut down as well, which means everybody's sort of frozen in place, and that sort of slowed the spread right down of the virus itself. And then, but the way people are reacting is pretty calm. Generally, I mean, we do know some people that have sort of been a bit overly panicky and cancelled things that they probably didn't need to cancel and so on. But generally, the reactions from most people seem to be fairly calm and fairly reasonable. Compared to what we're seeing from the other places around the world, you know, like the images that our friends are sending us from Australia are terrible, you know, and the people buying guns in America, it's a funny connection, isn't it, with when you have a health crisis to run out and buy guns, is an interesting reaction to that. Someone drew a parallel this week, we were talking about this, and comparing Fukushima. So some of you remember when Fukushima happened, that's 9 years ago that we had the Fukushima disaster. We had the earthquake followed by the tsunami, followed by the nuclear reactor melting down, you know. And we saw more panic from outside Japan than we saw from inside Japan. People outside Japan were sharing all the usual BS images of, you know, someone did this image that was supposed to be a scientific thing showing the nuclear cloud from Fukushima going across to the States. You know, it's going to come across to the States and everyone's going to die of what's that, nuclear poisoning or whatever that'd be. And of course that never happened, but everyone was panicking about it, and we were getting more panic from people outside Japan. You know, our friends and family in Australia. Come on, you know, it's you're going to die if you stay there. You have to come back to Australia. You can't stay in Japan. You know, it's going to be the end of the world. Going to be the end of the world, and they're all panicking and freaking out. Whereas in Japan, people are pretty calm. You know, pretty calm, and we had access to all the same information that people did outside Japan. And, you know, there's people outside Japan saying, you guys don't know, you know, the radiation levels are really high. Radiation poisoning, that's it, isn't it? Radiation levels are really high, and you guys don't know because the government's not telling you. But the reality was, of course, that Tokyo University and a whole bunch of other people, individuals, independent people, Greenpeace, anybody who wanted to could take a Geiger counter and go anywhere in Japan and measure the levels, you know, except for where it was actually closed off to the public because we knew the levels were high. But all the other places where people were telling us it's really high, you know, they're going on about how Tokyo was really high, and then they actually found out that the background radiation in Tokyo was lower than the background radiation in Hong Kong on a normal day. So these are just examples of how Japanese people react to a drama, to a disaster. And I mean, why this is, you know, it's a cultural thing, obviously. You know, well, first of all, Japanese people are used to disasters because we get 300 earthquakes a year. You know, not all big ones, of course, lots of little ones, but we get 300 earthquakes a year. We've got volcanoes that go off. We get tsunami. We get, you know, landslides up in the mountains every rainy season. We get flooding. We get, you know, we do get our share of disasters here. So it's sort of like the mindset of Japanese people is that disasters happen, and when a disaster happens, that you need to just, you know, follow instructions and be calm. So the rest of the Fukushima story, while the rest of the world was panicking and freaking out, Japanese people were just following what was supposed to be done. So okay, everyone needs to evacuate that area and come over here to this city and come into these halls over here. And okay, so they quietly did that. Calmly did that. Everyone evacuated and went to where they were supposed to go, the evacuation areas, and they set up little temporary houses for them, which sadly a lot of people are still in. Isn't that terrible 9 years later? But calmly went to the evacuation areas and into these places where the temporary accommodation for them, And okay, now come over here and queue up for food, and we'll give you food. And it was all very calm. There was no panicking, there was no fighting each other, there was no guns, there was nothing like that at all. When we were talking about that earlier this week, someone else reminded us about what happened in New Orleans in the States when they had their disaster there, which you could sort of put on a similar sort of scale to Fukushima, what happened in New Orleans. You know, there wasn't the nuclear thing, but there was the flooding and the people dying and the people being displaced, and the way people were behaving in the stadium in there, raping and killing each other, you know. So, you know, it just, so many examples. We were talking about this quite a bit this week, you know, once we started to compare what it was like. And again, with Australia, you know, Australia's not a good place to be at the moment because, you know, the virus is sort of, it's not hugely out of control there, but it's the people are, you know. The people are emptying supermarkets, just buying up everything. Absolutely everything. They're buying up freezers from the electrical stores and taking them home and filling them up with meat and just going into full-on panic mode, end of the world mode, you know. And no doubt when we make videos like this, there's always some people who arc up because they are in end of the world mode and they don't like to hear people suggesting that might not be rational or something. But it's about the behaviour. It's about the behaviour, you know. It seems to be the difference is Japanese culture is about thinking about other people and sort of following the way things are being done. So if someone says, okay, everyone come over here and do this, everyone will come over here and do this. You know, everybody come and evacuate that area, come over here and stay in this hall. That's what they'll do, you know. And then, of course, as far as wearing masks and washing hands and all that sort of stuff, that's what Japanese people do all the time anyway. So there's no difference for us when it comes to that either. So it's just the place to be. It really is. The more we've been hearing this week from other places around the world, and the more we compare it with what it's like here, it's pretty calm. It is pretty calm, you know. People aren't panicking. They're not attacking each other. That seems to be the difference too. It's it's when there's some sort of disaster or catastrophe of some sort, people here become very considerate of the group, and they're always considerate of the group. But it seems even more so, or maybe it's just more noticeable when there's a catastrophe. You know, people become very considerate of others, and being selfish in a situation like that is considered to be, you know, very, very not cool. So to be selfish and just thinking about yourself when there's a disaster would be considered to be really, really bad. And so it's really rare to see it. It's really rare to see it. You know, people aren't going to be fighting over the toilet paper or fighting over the food because that just wouldn't be the way that they do things. You know, it's all about considering other people and making sure everybody else is okay too, and sharing everything, sharing resources and sharing what's available instead of grabbing it all for themselves. So, you know, we're really, really happy to be here. You know, the only point of this video was just because we think this is a really interesting point that you know, in a disaster or a catastrophe or some sort of emergency, the way Japanese people behave is a good example to other people, really, you know. And I mean, it's not going to happen, is it? You know, the way that people behave in other countries when there's a disaster is the way they're going to behave. But it's really interesting to see, you know, how Japanese people react to these things, you know. And it's another, like a lot of these videos we make about things like this, it's just another little insight into Japanese thinking. You know, thinking about the other people and just talking to our neighbours and our friends and our family members, the way they've been reacting to things like the toilet paper. You know, don't buy two, only buy one because they'll let other people have some, and that sort of thing. You know, considering other people and thinking about other people, and the wearing of the masks and doing those things to protect other people. You know, and thinking about the group. We don't want to share around the group. And cancelling events and things because of that. We want to do our bit and we want to stay away from other people so that other people don't get it and other people, you know, are safer. And thinking about the old people a lot, that's been a central part of most of the conversations, is that people recognising that, you know, that older people are at risk from the virus more than young people, so being really considerate towards the older people to make sure the older people don't get it. So, yeah, interesting, isn't it? So we're not saying, no, we're here, aren't we lucky? That's not the idea of the video, but it's just interesting. You know, those of you who are in Japan, the reason that we just came from the airport was we had a friend visiting from Australia, and some of their friends in Australia freaked out, and as a result they've gone home, and we think it was a big mistake. We think they were much safer here. We're out in the countryside of Japan in an area that has no cases of the virus have been identified around here at all, and you know, we just think it's a much better place to be at the moment. You know, there's no food shortages here. The supermarkets are absolutely full. The only thing that we have to line up for is the masks, and we can't buy alcohol. So like cleaning alcohol for our hands, we can't buy that at the moment. But everything else is ample. You know, we went to the supermarket yesterday, and it was just, you know, compared to what it's like in Australia, the bakery was full in the supermarket. The supermarket bakery was full. The meat section was full. Fruit and vegetable was full. You know, everything just like it always is when we go there in the morning. Everything's full. You know, you buy as much as you want, and no limits. The only thing they had limits on was the toilet paper and the tissue paper. There was limits to how many you could buy. Everything else you could buy as much as you wanted, but people weren't. People weren't, because they know that there's an excess of everything and that we don't need to buy anything. So people weren't panic buying anything, you know. And the atmosphere was really calm. It was funny, around that mountain of toilet paper, it was super calm. It was absolutely super calm around the mountain of toilet paper. There was no one there. It was really funny. It was really funny because, you know, in contrast to what's happening in some other places around the world, it was sort of like, because the mountain of toilet paper was so big, it must have reassured everybody as well. You know, it reassured us. It was like, oh wow, no shortage of toilet paper there, check that out. And of course, you can buy another packet every time you go if you want to, and we just didn't bother. You know, because recently we bought our big packet, we've got our big packet, and we don't need to buy more. When we need more, we'll buy it, you know. So, anyway, there it was. As always, we just show you what we see and what we experience in Japan, and this is what we're seeing and experiencing. We try not to judge whether it's a good or a bad thing, we just show you, you know, and there it is. There's another thing from Japan, like we always do. However, in this case, I mean, we're clearly happy with the way people are behaving here. You know, instead of taking a problem, making it into a bigger problem, they're being really calm and you know, it's good. It's all good. Anyway, there it was. More videos coming soon.